Hi everyone, I'm Patrick, and I have a background in various types of OSINT investigations conducted over the past 7 years. Currently, I work within the content protection area, and I'm based in London. Before I start my presentation, I would like to make a short disclaimer. The views expressed in this presentation are the views of are the personal views of the speaker, and may not be understood as being made on behalf of an organization. All right, so in this presentation, I will introduce the Puzzle-Palace model in conducting OSINT investigations. And my perspective on OSINT is based on my experience and knowledge accumulated over the past years. Therefore, OSINT is a creative and dynamic process. It is ethically and legally constrained. It is height-value target-centered and contextual. It is online and offline enforcement-oriented. It has to be actionable, and it has to anticipate future events. And OSINT is a means to safeguard those interests of an individual or an organization. The presentation structure follows the Puzzle-Palace model, which is based on a couple of components, which I will describe over the next slide. The inspiration of the Puzzle-Palace model comes from a book written by James Bamford in the 80s. And James tried at that time to analyze or to build a picture of the National Security Agency using various types of OSINT sources. At that time, he used, for example, newspapers, other documents collected from the public libraries, FOIAs, requests, and he put together a comprehensive puzzle of this organization. The Puzzle-Palace model consists of various components, as I mentioned, and I will explain each component or phase over the next slides. And before I do that, I would like to introduce or give you more background about the case study, which is related to offshore hosting providers and why they are important to be considered, for example, in cybercrime investigations. Of course, the Puzzle-Palace model can be applied to various types of OSINT investigations. But coming back to offshore hosting providers, these entities have started to proliferate over the past years in various offshore jurisdictions with lenient regulations or legislations. And they are typically off the radar for many private organizations and law enforcement agencies, but they may be set up to facilitate cybercrime in many occasions. Some of their characteristics are highlighted on these slides. For example, a company that is set up in Belize and in an offshore jurisdiction uses an onshore technical infrastructure. For example, it rents servers in the Netherlands to optimize content delivery. The operators of this offshore company may reside in countries that have stronger legislation in place. They may use different techniques to evade detection and prosecution. They usually obtain an autonomous system number for their operations, which is assigned by a regional or local internet registry, whose know your business customer requirements may not always be clear. And in some of the occasions, they lack these requirements. The autonomous system number is a set of internet routable IP prefixes belonging to a network or a collection of networks that is under the control supervision of a single entity. The IP addresses and autonomous systems may be shared with several other company names, and these offshore hosting providers are used by a wide range of industries, including legitimate businesses. So in some situations where law enforcement, for example, is looking into them, they have to establish clear evidence that over 90% or 95% of the content or the services used on their servers are infringing, or related to criminal activity. They typically operate on relatively low cost. Also they are also providing, for example, convenient or low pricing for servers in different jurisdictions. And on the right hand side, I have provided a resource where you can search for different offshore service providers, which is a web hosting directory. And you can they provide some information on these offshore service providers and also their pricing information. In addition, you can also have a look on offshore.cat. And of course, you can conduct further searches on forums and online communities such as Reddit, for example. All right, now I will introduce the first component of the Puzzle Palace model. And this component is segmentation. Segmentation is important because you have to understand the context of the investigation. You have to understand the requirements set in the beginning of the investigation. And based on those requirements, you define the data points, and you have to understand afterwards how to prioritize the leads based on those data points. And following that, you define the unknowns in the investigation. Now, we'll move to a case study where I investigated an offshore hosting provider. And in this example, the context was provided by a media article which is related to a company in a jurisdiction being accused of cyber attacks and other malicious activities. Also, looking on other sources on the internet, for example, on forums, we have identified various data points related to this entity or the network of entities. For example, we have discovered various company names, the types of cyber attacks, the autonomous system numbers used, the timestamps, a potential location in Belize, and some additional tags or keywords. Moving next, I will explain the exploration phase of the Puzzle Palace model. So the structure of the exploration that I use for this presentation is based on three main areas. And I have data points, for example, available data points, context, and data sources. Then the second area is leads prioritization, how to prioritize leads based on source credibility, relevancy, um, impact potential, corroboration. For example, if the information can be found in additional sources or in other sources. And I would say the most important one of the most important ones here, the chain of continuity. If you can maintain, for example, the chain of continuity from the beginning of the investigation to the end of the investigation, which is very important in offline enforcement, for example, or if you are going in a court. And the last area here is unknown unknowns, which is related to data sources, data points, target behavior, intentions, followed by the scope of the actor. Now, looking at the OSINT sources, we have three areas here: online sources, public records, and physical sources in some cases for the investigation, and Cyber-HUMINT, which is the phase after the OSINT in some of the cases, where you are gaining additional information based on what you have obtained during the OSINT investigation. In some cases, you can conduct Cyber-HUMINT in the initial phase of the investigation to find out some additional data points, but I would suggest to exhaust all the means in conducting OSINT investigations to have better background about the targets, and afterwards pursuing Cyber-HUMINT. Moving next, I have looked, for example, in our case studies, to understand how the target company is related, for example, to other companies in the internet ecosystem. So the case here, or the situation here, is that in some jurisdiction, you don't have the same access to information as in other, jurisdictions. For example, in Belize, they have a closed or semi-open, I would say, business register. You only can find out the company name and the company registration number and the date or the registration date for that company. And upon a fee, or if you pay or use a commercial service, you can find out more about that company. But in some of the cases, we are not able to find the owner or the ownership and also the financials for that company. So if we are dealing with these situations, unknown situations about the company, how we can find the individuals behind the company, the offshore company? So one way, for example, in investigating offshore hosting providers, is by looking at their peering companies using a tool such as that provided by the company Hurricane Electric, which is based in the States, in the United States. And they have a tool called the BGP Toolkit, which stands for Border Gateway Protocol. And this gateway protocol enables internet exchange routing information between autonomous systems, between internet providers, service providers, for example. So here we have the target company, then we have 4 other companies here which have contractual relationship with the target company. In some situation, the owner of the peering company is the owner of the offshore companies. So this is what I discovered during the investigation. So this is one way to identify, for example, the relationship between these companies and to find out the unknown in the investigation, for example. Of course, there are other terminological terms here, for example, to understand the upstream and downstream in routing information over the internet, but I will not get into the specifics. The second resource here is Shodan, and I use Shodan here to map the servers or the concentration of the servers in different locations. For example, in this instance, I found out that the servers are rented in the Netherlands and in Estonia. We can perform additional searches or dorks using Internet of Things search engines, and this is explained in the next slide, where you can see, for example, different exploration dorks, as I call them, via the ISP, the Internet Service Provider, organization name, ASN, or you can search or narrow down the investigation by a server type, a product, operating system, or country. A complementary tool here is Netlas, which provides a discovery feature and is a nice visualization feature where you can map or build the dots between different IP ranges or servers under the same autonomous system number, for example, or the same hosting company. Of course, you can do different type of connections here. The third component within the puzzle palace model is related to Cyber-HUMINT, and in this case study, I use Cyber-HUMINT after conducting OSINT investigations in order to understand more about the services provided by the target company. So just a basic understanding about Cyber-HUMINT and how you have to do it is first to understand the OPSEC model of the target. And for example, it's important to set up and maintain the covered personas. And in this case, I used only an engagement pretext in order to engage with the target, in order to find out the services, for example, and the pricing. It's important to also select the appropriate communication channel, for example, email or a Telegram or WhatsApp. And in all the investigation, I use a model that is aligned with the law enforcement and the court standards in the specific jurisdiction where I'm based. So if I'm based in the United Kingdom, I use the model provided by College of Policing, for example. In the United States, you have to follow their standards. Now we can move to the third component of the puzzle palace model, which is pattern recognition. Here, it is important, as I said, to understand the data points and to start building the connection between the data points. So we can map these connections using Maltigo, the community edition, and we can assign, different nodes and labels to the nodes and linkages in Maltigo. So in my case study, I looked at recurring content, individuals, and similar events. Similar events such as the same timestamps, for example, in domain registrations or locations of the companies, or specific keywords that have been attributed by different users to the attacks that came from the target company or target companies. Moving next, the fourth phase is interconnection. During the interconnection phase, we have to understand the type of relationship between data. So we can classify them as direct and indirect relationship. And what I previously stated about the chain of continuity, we can do this by taking notes using Obsidian, which is a tool that has been previously mentioned in the previous presentation. And it enables you to track your investigation from the beginning to the end. And if you have a structure, it becomes much more easier to follow it and attach evidence to that. There are other methods and tools you can use. For example, you can also create timelines, different, using a tool that I mentioned here, or you can use mind mapping tools such as Xmind or Gitmind. All right. The fifth phase here is integration. So now we interconnected the data points, and we have an understanding of how these data points are connected between each other. But now we have to start building, the report, and we have to rank the data points based on their relevancy. So here we have to do a synthesis about what we have collected. We have to cross-verify the data points and validate them. We have to understand the context of how these data points are related at specific timestamps. And we have to build the narrative for the audience, our target audience, based on the requirements that were set in the beginning of the investigation. So one model here that I mentioned is provided by College of Policing in the United Kingdom, and is based on two phases during the acquisition and exploitation. So you have a ranking for source and intelligence, for example. And then we have a ranking for how the intelligence handling is handled, and also for the specific intelligence unit. Of course, this model has to be adjusted and adapted to the private sector or other specific organization. But I think this one is a good starting point in order to build up a prioritization matrix, which is needed in OSINT investigations in order to provide a relevant picture about the data point that have been identified. All right. The last component is holistic insight. So in this phase, we have to develop intelligence assessments, and we have to provide an introduction, for example, of how we made the report, and how the report has to be followed by the target audience. We also have to provide accurate contextual interpretation and to use a multi-dimensional analysis. Well, of course, the intelligence assessments here are only based on the investigation, so they are coming from an investigative side, but they are not the intelligence analysis, which I would say is the following point after you are making the intelligence assessment. An intelligence assessment, intelligence analysis is usually, it has to be um, to anticipate future events, and it usually deals with what happens tomorrow, but it doesn't take into account what happens the day after tomorrow. So this is an important remark that I would like to highlight here. All right. So now I would like to sum up all of these phases, and I will start by saying that this presentation was meant to introduce a methodological and structural approach, which is the Puzzle Palace model for conducting OSINT investigations. The idea is to ensure a continuous documentation and collection of evidence, or that chain of continuity during the investigative process. It has to be documented using Obsidian, has to be it has to be accurate. It has to be all the data points have to be connected. For example, you can use Maltigo in this phase. All the leads have to be prioritized, and you have to establish connections between various data points in order to integrate the puzzle. And finally, you have to combine and validate data points while building a global picture supported by intelligence assessments. So I believe these are the points that I would like you to retain from this presentation. And thank you very much for your time.